Welcome to the Evangelistic House of God podcast.
Unscripted discussions on social issues from a Christian's perspective.
Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the EHOG podcast. I'm Pastor Rod Harris with Pastor Steve Harris.
Hey, how you
What's
doing?
going on, man?
Good.
Oh, we got us a beautiful day out here, and we got some wonderful topics to discuss with you. We got some social issues from a Christian's perspective, and we're going to break some things down for you today.
Yeah.
The thing we want to talk about today was relationships.
Okay.
I had counseled some people over the last couple of weeks about their relationships, and I thought it would be a good idea to share some of not their problems, but the discussion that we were having about signs to understand when it's time to move on in a relationship. A lot of people will try to hold on to a relationship no matter what the cost, no matter what the pain or the circumstances are.
Yeah.
And there are some signs that things just aren't working well, and you might need to think about when it's time to move on. And this is not just necessarily a relationship between couples either. And we're not talking about necessarily marriage and all of that. But even in a friendship, where we got friends, buddies that's supposed to be, together, and you claim you're best friends, but you're not getting the same relationship, the same effects out of the relationship as maybe the other person is. And so sometimes it might be time to break apart and move on from those kind of things, and we want to discuss those a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
So
What we got?
I got a list of things here. So one of the signs I want to talk about is when you live in past memories more than the present. So when you think about your relationship and the things that you used to do in the past are more prevalent or more exciting to you than what you're doing in your present life in this relationship, that might be a sign that things are not working the way they should.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it's more than just relationships. It's just people that live in the past,
Yeah.
And, it's become apparent to me that, a lot of people either they live in the past or they live in the future, but very few people live in the present.
Yeah.
Right. And so you start to, you see people and whether it's a relationship or just in their personal lives, a lot of times you feel like your best is already past you. And for whatever reason, people just stop living for today.
Oh, yeah.
They had fun yesterday or 2 years ago or a decade ago, and people, they get caught on that. And that was when we really were loving and we really cared about each other. But then there's some kind of a fundamental breakdown that takes place in the relationship where people they just stop communicating, which is one of the big, it's always the biggest part. They stop communicating and they start to, in some ways, take each other for granted.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, well, you're my wife, you my husband, or you my boyfriend, whatever the case is. And it's like, it just gets stale. People, they put their best foot forward early on.
Well, that's their representative.
Yeah,
So their best
and so you start doing all kind of stuff that you wouldn't normally do because you're trying to win your mate. You're trying to show them who you are, the best of you. And so then those things get caught in the old memories. Yep. And then as the relaxed you starts to appear later on through life, you start reverting back to, well, I remember when, instead of what can we do today? Yeah.
I got two examples of that. And one is I was in a Panera Bread with my son one day. He just turned 18 at the time.
Yeah.
And a guy walks up to us and says, "Is this your son?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man, I bet you wish you could be his age again." I'm like, heck no, I wouldn't go back to being 17, 18 years old again.
A lot of people would.
I mean, he got offended almost and was arguing with me. "Oh, man, yes, you would. Who wouldn't want to be 18 again?" And I'm like, look, those are good years. I give it that.
Yeah.
But nothing can compare to the life that I enjoy and live here every day.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of those people that make the most of every day of my life. And today just so happens to be the best day of my life. And tomorrow will happen to be the best day of my life as well.
That's right.
Because I have determined that every day I will live it to the fullest.
That's right.
When I think about a relationship in those terms, I also had the other example I had was a couple that lived in the past, and they kept talking about what they used to do and what we used to do, and we used to have fun, and we used to ride roller coasters, and we used to go on trips, and we used to go out to dinner, and we used to have dates. And they got so focused on that until I asked them, well, when is your most recent memory of you having a great time?
Right.
And it was like 6 or 7 years ago. They pointed to a picture that they had at Cedar Point when they had just got off of a ride, and it's like, well, what happened, and how come you don't have those kind of moments again? And like you were saying, I think they just get to the point where they start taking each other for granted. They start forgetting what made their relationship special in the first place. and they forget to continue that process and making those memories continue to happen.
Right.
And one of the things I had advised them to do is I wanted them to focus on having a date night at least once a week.
Yeah.
And they needed to alternate those date nights and make sure that one week it was her turn to choose, the next week it was his turn to choose. And that you can't say no to that. You got to follow through on whatever that other person wanted to do that week.
Yeah.
And making sure that it doesn't have to cost money. It could be, boiling some green beans and sitting on the couch. If that's what he want to do on his date night, then sit on the couch with him and eat your green beans. But, I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to share in each other's excitement and fun about things that they wanted to do with each other.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And also to be active in that, instead of it just being another thing that you do.
Right.
And and I like the idea of being able to give it to each other, like this is my week, this is your week, so that, it takes some thought, it's some preparation, something interesting, instead of just, the same old every time.
Yeah.
It's like, try to one up it, try to do something different, try to do something that you wouldn't normally do, to stimulate something.
And I think the biggest thing is, most people will tell you that they can't afford it. And I had to stress to them that it is not about how much money you spend. It can be a free walk through the park. Yeah. It can be a picnic. The dinner you was already going to create and make for dinner, pack it up in a box and take it, sit on the grass and eat it.
But it was something about when you were talking about, how people live in the past, right, in a relationship. And I think I started off saying there were some fundamental issues, right, that something had taken place. And so when you analyze, and this may not be true for everybody, but when you analyze that something dramatic took place or something happened that you were not ready for or accustomed to. So like, say for instance, when you are a young couple, right, and we talked about all of the stuff that we would do outside of what you would normally do, right? Yeah. But then you get kids, and the kids start, it's fun because they're little and they're tiny and y'all could do stuff, and you see that part of your, you envision that. But people don't transition through life into kids being older, kids being teenagers, kids starting to, have their own lives and their own opinions and moving out. Yeah, they're not listening intently to everything that you say. Just all different types of things in that way. You're older, you can't do the things you used to do. And instead of finding a way to bridge those gaps or to adjust, you end up just giving up and reverting to yesterday.
Yeah. I think that, and we can exhaust this conversation for a while, because living in the past is detrimental to almost any relationship. Yeah. And I have never seen a relationship that benefited from somebody talking about how great their past used to be compared to what they're living in today. And so I think that is something that we really got to overcome, even as individuals, let alone as a couple.
Also, people stop living for themselves as a husband and wife and start living for their children.
Oh yeah, or the other person.
Or the other person, yeah. But I'm saying, I don't mean to put that off. I just had a thought, that's all. Yeah. But I was just saying, people start living for the kids vicariously, and then all of your dreams and hopes and ambitions is now placed on that kid. And so everything you do is funneled into the children. Yeah. And so it has drained the life out of the relationship between the parents, because the kids, everything is about them first. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't, the kids don't come first, but there's got to be something in there for the relationship.
For the relationship. Yeah, that's a real one right there. Okay. And for the sake of time, I got about 10 or 12 of these, so I'm going to move to the next one. Okay. When the relationships brings you more pain than joy. So when you are in a relationship and you do more complaining than you do celebrating, when you do more crying than you do laughing, when you are more alienated or alone than you are together, there's signs that is a problem in a relationship.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't look at it in that way. They never take the time to analyze that.
Oh yeah.
Because they always feel like, complaining just becomes a part of life.
Yeah.
And it just becomes part of who you are and what's going on with you and how you live and all of that type of thing. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, it just, she's doing this or he's doing that, and you have accepted it, You have reconciled it within yourself, even though it's chaotic to your mind, but you're not doing anything actively to stop it or prevent it. So it just has become a part of the way you guys live. Yeah.
You know, I think that it gets so, that complaining becomes so toxic in a relationship because you don't even notice the good things because you just get to a mode of complaining about everything. And I had explained to someone at one point, I had heard two sides of an argument, and the woman just kept going and going and going. And I had to pause her and say, you don't even recognize when you've won.
Yeah.
You're so used to fighting until you don't even recognize when things are in your favor. And so your argument actually always turns the tables on you and makes you the bad guy.
Yeah.
When you could have accepted your victory and moved on to the next, happy moment in life.
Yeah.
I think another thing that really brings on that complaining and that pain from a relationship is when the expectations of the relationship have changed. So a lot of times, him being on the couch, he was a couch potato when you met him.
Right.
She was a shopaholic when you met her.
Right.
She was a go-bot. And now you want something different, and so you complain about that.
Yeah. Right.
And, when you expect change in a relationship, when you expect that you can change a person after the fact, you're going to always end up on a raw side of a debate or a relationship.
Because people change because they want to change, not because you want them to change.
Well,
yeah, and most people feel like they're just fine, just like they are. I
guarantee you that about 99% of our listeners feel like I am good the way I am. I don't need to change, and there's nothing about me that's wrong. It's their fault. It's their fault or their problem.
Yeah, unless they see it, you're not going to get no change out of them.
Yeah, and and so when he or she expects you to change, it almost builds up a resentment. And it builds up a barrier, and this wall kind of goes up, and you think to yourself, I'm not going to change, I'm not going to be different because you want me to.
Right.
And to be honest with you, I don't think that's right either. So I get it that you should not expect change out of a person to a degree, but if you're not growing in a relationship, if we're not growing together and we're not becoming more cohesive, or if I get it, when we were 19, you were a video game idiot, right?
Yeah.
And you played video games all day, but now we're 32 and you still playing video games and eating pizza and drinking Coke. Something is wrong here,
right. That's right.
And so I think that there's an expectation that growth should happen in a relationship and that people should grow together. I don't necessarily think that, you can expect people to change, especially overnight.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
All right. So let's look at when you keep justifying his or her actions to yourself.
So you justifying your mate's action.
Right. So they're abusive. They yell at you. They don't come home at night. They don't sleep in the same bed with you. They're always on the phone, or they're always, into themselves, or they spend more time on social media than in the present. And you continue to make excuses for their behavior. They don't have a job, and they're not contributing to the household finances, and you're struggling to pay the bills. And you just say, well, that's because, she has a hard time getting along with other people at work.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people make excuses for their mates.
Yeah. I think it's a form of embarrassment too. They don't, you're embarrassed about their behavior, and you know that it's unusual, and that's why you're trying to make excuses for it, because you're looking at it as though it is a reflection on you as well. Because you're one. That's your mate, and it's your other half, and so you feel like you have to take up for the other half, for their shortcomings, and so it is. It's a way that people deal with embarrassment. But I guess the other side is that the person that is explaining away the other mate doesn't realize that that's exactly what it looks like to people that's listening, is that, you're just making excuses for that person.
Yeah, it's like, she ain't cooked dinner because she was tired, her back was hurting. It's like, well, you've been eating McDonald's for the last 6 weeks, so something ain't right.
Because sometimes it doesn't feel good to hear that about somebody that you love very well. So you feel like you have to protect them as much as you can.
But in doing so, doesn't that also exacerbate their behaviors and cause them to formulate a posture that this is good for me or this is okay because they're not complaining about it?
Yeah, you become an enabler.
Yeah.
To that. But at the time, you're not reconciling that action. You're just looking at it from a protection standpoint.
Yeah.
And so that's what comes first is I got to protect me and this person. I got to protect us.
Right.
Because people from the outside are trying to get at us. And,
I think
it doesn't help.
I think this kind of ties into that expectation of change a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're expecting them to be something different and they're not, so you make excuses for them, this is going to lead into more trouble and more trauma along the lines, or down the line, I should say. I think one way of tackling that or kind of dealing with that is being very open with your vision and your direction as a couple. Yeah. And having that conversation. And I've also often believed that a man or the leader or the head of a household should be open enough to have a vision and then share that with his wife or his girlfriend or significant other and help them understand where I would like us to be at a certain point in time, right? Yeah. And then get their buy-in on that, right? And so they might be able to enhance that vision and they might be able to enhance your plan for getting there and add something to the strategy. Yeah. And together, if you focus on those goals, I think you got a better chance of making some changes together than you would expecting somebody to change on their own.
Right. But it takes courage to be able to do it because, sometimes we get so wrapped up in each other's emotions and you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. You don't want to, start an argument. You don't want to go through any drama or traumatic experience with your mate. And so you just kind of keep hitting around and going over the mountain and down the side and around the corner.
But see, that's what built
hoping
up
that they'll get it.
But that built up that sword. That built up resentment.
Yeah.
And then you find that you're fighting about everything. You fighting about which side the remote should sit on, whether it should be on the arm of the chair or on the table. Just be stupid stuff because there's something deep seated in there that you have not been able to let out and overcome.
Absolutely.
All of this stuff is going to boil down to open and honest communication with your soulmate. In any form, right? Yeah. But it's just different ways of tackling it and looking at it, too.
And getting help too from outside sources where people who are trained and have an understanding of how to deal with these type of situations and who can kind of coach both you and your mate through that situation.
Yeah, one of the things that I had talked to another couple about at one point because they were having a hard time communicating their goals and their dreams and desires to each other was to just sit down and have a dialogue and take turns, right?
Okay.
You get 2 minutes to talk about what you want to talk about. They hold the stopwatch.
Yeah.
When they're done, you get 2 minutes to rebut or talk about what you want to talk about. And my experience with that kind of process or that experiment is that you never get past 6 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because you find that after the 6th minute or the second time the other person gets to talk, you're just repeating yourself, meaning that you don't have that much stuff against the other person.
I agree.
Or that much stuff against the relationship. It's just the same couple of things. Once you get down to the root cause of those things, you'll find that it's really one or two things that's keeping you apart.
Yeah.
And so allowing each other to really speak and doing that active listening will give you the opportunity to be heard and to hear what somebody else is really feeling about the relationship.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I do the same technique. Sometimes what I'll do is when one person is speaking, I will ask in advance for the mate to not form a defense.
Oh, most definitely. You gotta be open-minded.
Yeah, you got to be open-minded, and then the only thing I want them to do is address the concern.
Yes.
I take all of you out and only address the concern from their perception, and that way you get a true sense of what that person is going through, and then vice versa. But if you sit two people down and you let them start talking sometimes, and all they're doing is all while they are talking, they're preparing a defense, like they're in court, trying to get a winner. But what you want is both sides to win, not just one person.
And I found that in an argument or in a contentious conversation like that, right? I tell people the only one that wins in this argument is the one that is the most humble. And this ought to be a contest to see who can lower themselves to the lowest esteem for the other person's benefit.
Yes.
And in that situation, it becomes more of a contest about how much more I love you than you think I do, right? And it's almost a competition about, well, I'm sorry that it turned out that way because I really didn't mean it that way. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that it turned, and you find that they just keep humbling themselves a little bit lower and a little bit lower and a little bit lower until you realize that we don't really have a problem. Other than the fact that we're not talking.
It always boils down to communication. Yeah.
All right, here's a big one. When he or she is causing emotional, physical, or verbal hurt. That's abuse, in my opinion.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Whether it's emotional, physical, or verbal. I even told somebody, their problem was, I tried to explain to them that they're being abused. And they said, well, no, the biggest problem we have is that they'll shut down on me. And I'm like, if you shut down on a person, that is abuse.
Yeah.
That is a form of verbal abuse.
Yeah.
It's a form of physical abuse. Anytime that you're expecting a response from me and I'm so angry that I can't talk to you for a day or two or for hours at a time, you are abusing. Mm-hmm. You are abusing the relationship. You are abusing me as a person. You have to be open for dialogue.
Right. That's a disciplinary response too. You're trying to set out when you shut down on somebody. That's a form of punishment. You're trying to make sure you get at them because they desire conversation and you're going to take that part away, which means that you're not actively seeking peace. You're not actively trying to restore the relationship. You're not trying to correct what's wrong. You just want revenge.
Exactly. And you feel like you have the power because they are seeking for you to respond to them, which I call petting the devil.
Yeah.
It's like the more you keep asking, what's wrong, Rocco? Why you ain't talking to me? Yeah. All you doing is petting the devil and making them more audacious than they need to be.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, get that out of the system, talk about how it makes you feel, and then move on. Or get a second or third party person to come in and kind of help you intervene in that relationship.
And a person that actively participates in that is they lack maturity.
Oh yeah,
it's a very immature way of dealing with situations that, it's almost like I'm gonna take my ball and go home.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, wait a minute, if you really want to build a relationship, the last thing you want to do is end the communication.
Another one is when the same issue or situation keeps reoccurring, even though you've tried addressing it.
Okay.
So you've had a conversation with her about spending too much money and the lights getting shut off, and month after month she goes to the store and jacks the loot. What do you do about a situation like that?
Well, you can't keep trying the same approach, right? Yeah. Because you're not able to get any help. You're not able to get anywhere with that. So the thing you do need is to get help.
Yes.
And and that's what I alluded to earlier, is that sometimes if you don't have a way of dealing with that person, maybe you can sit down with a third party to sit down and kind of help you get through that situation.
Yeah. So let's assume that the other person doesn't want the third party intervention and won't come to the table with a third-party person, like a counselor or a minister or someone of that caliber.
Yeah, that's going to be very difficult to do.
Yeah, I still would advise that the person that is having the issue come and get help, because even if your significant other, your wife or your husband won't come with you, at least you can get some understanding about how you need to behave and maybe to help change that behavior.
That's a really good point.
A lot of times they're like, well, he won't come to the church. He won't talk to my pastor with me. And talk to your pastor anyway. Talk to your minister anyway. Talk to your counselor anyway, because we might be able to give you some pointers or some direction that might help either bring them in or help arm you with information that you can help avoid a conflict and help to fix or heal the situation.
That's right. One thing I will add to that is that for those people who are not in relationships and looking for relationships, do your homework first and understand who you're dealing with first.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of people, we always have to remind them to manage their expectations on somebody who they've always known operates in a certain way. And then now
that kind of gets blinded when you fall so much in love and you get caught up in the emotion that you forget their flaws and their issues and some of the things that they have not been able to work out as an individual.
Yeah.
That can be messed up. Yeah, so it's very important that you actually pay attention to the person you're with and not their representative. Sometimes conversations, time spent with other people will help to bring those things out. It's hard to see that when it's just you and them one-on-one all the time.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that sometimes, I'll leave that for another day. But
okay.
You're right.
When I say that it's hard to see it sometimes when you're just one-on-one, is that you get these blinders on, right?
Yeah, it's not that I disagree with that at all. Okay. I agree. I was going to go into something else, but I want to keep us on track.
Okay.
That's all. I agree.
All right. So when he or she puts little to no effort in a relationship, that is a big sign that you got trouble.
Yeah, it is.
So if you're the one that is always advancing or trying to move the relationship forward, and they just kind of like on the lazy river letting you do whatever you want to do and they're not putting anything in it, it might be a sign that either they're emotionally checked out or they are just not feeling the relationship anymore.
I agree. And I think it's also important for people who maybe carry in the relationship is to also not put yourself in a position of being a martyr too. Because that happens all the time.
Good point.
Because they feel so
wounded.
Dogged out, that they do all these extra things and they never even ask their mate for help. And they just keep adding it to the list. Yep, didn't help me do that, didn't help me do that, didn't help me do that. So those type of things don't help either. But I think it's at that point you got to sit down and have a real conversation. And I'll go back to that elementary way. When you do this, you make me feel like
this.
Yeah, and people are like, yeah, I already know that. But how many people practice it? Because you can't really argue with how somebody feels.
Right.
You can't tell, no, you don't feel that way. No, you can't tell me how I feel.
Right.
You can only address it or ignore it.
Very good. I mean, all of this stuff is so funny because as we're talking about these topics and these different symptoms, they all lead back to the same root cause, which is broken communication.
That's right.
And I had said once before in another podcast that any difference that you're having with another individual, I bet you that 99% of the time it is about communication.
Yeah. And misunderstanding.
Yeah. Let's look at another one here. When your fundamental values and beliefs are different, that's a sign that there's trouble
real
in the relationship.
Bad sign.
Yeah. So, and this can be from anything from religion to work ethic to children to moralities, political stances. There are very few people that I have ever seen successfully live together, divided on politics, divided on religion, or divided on any morals. I mean, that is a hard stance.
Yeah, it's hard. And I was just sitting here thinking about it, how difficult that is because you have two different foundations when a marriage is supposed to be built on one.
Yeah.
And so whenever, you got a separate religion from my religion, or you go to church and I don't go to church, or you don't believe in God and I do, and all of this type of stuff, it's separated. Those are natural separations that you got to really try hard to overcome. You have to overlook a whole lot of things. A whole lot of stuff. To be able to do that. And it's dysfunctional from the start. And usually they don't happen. Yeah. They don't last unless somebody is willing to make a leap.
Yeah. I mean, and that change is possible, especially when you can show them the better side of a fundamental or of a situation.
But then it also goes back to understanding who you married when you married them, right? Because chances are, if you were somebody who's devoted to church and you married somebody who was not, with the thought that you were going to convert them after marriage, it's not a good idea.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's not a good way to look at it.
You cannot change people, and I think that's a fundamental breakdown right there.
When you got these fundamental values and beliefs that you haven't discussed as a couple before entering into marriage. And that's one reason as we marry people, we say, entering into the matrimony is something that should not go into ill-advised or, or not advised, or having that discussion is because you find out 2 or 3 years later that, wait a minute, me and this person are not compatible in any format, in any way or at all.
Right.
And we've allowed ourselves to be forced into a relationship that we're not feeling.
Right.
Because we can't get along on simple stuff, and that's why it's really good help to be able to sit around. And that's what I mean when I say be around other people. Because when you are together with that one person, you're blinded by what you feel for that person, what you see in that person. And it's very hard for them to change and come out of their representative in that mode because they don't need to be nothing but what you see all day long.
Right.
But when you see how they interact with your family, and you see how they interact with your church members, and if you got children, how they interact with your children, if you watch them in those kind of circles, it can kind of open up your understanding about who this person really is
right.
and how they really think and
That's
believe
right.
about life.
Right. And a lot of younger people, I don't know if it's just younger, but people will give you telltale signs about your mate too. And I know people, they want to, they getting hardened and they don't want to hear anything. And I'm going, all it does, especially with young people, it just drive them closer and harder together.
Yes.
Bond them because you said, and the pride takes over. But you really should listen to those people whose opinions you respect, because oftentimes they have really good advice.
Yeah, and the other thing is watching other couples that are very successful in marriage.
Absolutely.
When I decided, when I wanted to get married, I had patterned my thought and my mental picture of what a real marriage should look like based on the successful people that I knew around me.
Oh, sure.
We had people that had been married for 25 years and, had been together since high school, and they were still happy and enjoying each other and enjoying life. And I kind of engrossed myself in those kind of relationships and became that third wheel because I was trying to understand and learn, how did you nab a woman like this that would do anything for you? Why is it that she is so dedicated and loyal? And, how do you keep that love alive and keep those conversations flowing? And I found out that, a lot of it was based on their communication and how open and direct they were with each other.
Yeah.
But I really suggest that if you're thinking about entering into a marriage, you got to open up and get yourself around other people that are successful in that thing, just like you would in any other thing. Right. If you wanted to be a DJ or a basketball player or an artist, you would surround yourself with great artists, great basketball players, and you learn from their films and their tapes, you watch what they've done to be successful. I suggest you do the same thing before you try to enter into dating or into marriage.
I agree.
Yeah, anything else to add before we close this one out?
I have a lot to add, but no. I think that we've pretty much exhausted that.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a part 2 on this one.
Sure.
Send us some comments. Let us know what you think. Hit that subscribe button and those like buttons, and we'll be back with you next week. Take care.
All right. See ya.